what do you think will change in regulation bodies and rules applied in a no-deal, in a deal scenario?
We all know that for the time being, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, is still a member of the European Union, and it enjoys, and the carriers enjoy, the privileges of the common European market, which means that each European carrier, community carrier is the official term, can land and start from each airport in Europe without any permission, without anything else, without any formalities. So, and this has developed over the past, say, 20, 30 years, and we all have advantages from it. For example, the upcoming of the low-cost carriers, one of these consequences. EasyJet goes from Berlin to Mallorca, to any other places, holiday destinations within Europe. In former times, or usually, globally speaking, it's quite unusual, because usually a carrier from a third country cannot make connections between two other countries, between Germany and Spain, a British carrier. It's not the case. It's not the case because EasyJet is a European carrier, Germany is Europe, and so is Spain. So it's a European carrier which operates within Europe, no problem. This is the advantage, the great advantage for all of us, or for all passengers in Europe. So when this picture changes, 12 o'clock, midnight, 30th of March, Great Britain, the UK, will be no longer member of this privileged club. So what does it mean? We first will have to see, is EasyJet still a European carrier, a community carrier, or is it a British carrier? If the latter is the case, the privileges are gone. No way. So, or TUI, is it a British carrier, British company? Is it a European company? And the answer to this question is laid down in the European Regulation 2008, the famous 2008, setting three requirements for to be a European carrier. First is the majority of the shares have to be held by European citizens or governments. Okay, must be proven. And even if this is proven through some circumventory measures, foundation, solutions, whatever this is, there is another requirement. The control must be effectively exercised by Europeans and not by third country persons and companies. So this is harder to prove, this is harder to scrutinize, but of course the competent authorities will have a very detailed eye on it, and they will check it. They will check it, and they will find out whether or not this is the case. So to find this out takes time, of course, and the European Union is just currently negotiating. The bodies of the European Union, the legislative bodies, are currently negotiating a package, the so-called Basic Connectivity Regulation, which hopefully enters into force before the 29th of March, which says, okay, for this scrutinization, is a company effectively controlled by Brits or by Europeans? We, the European Union, give the authorities a time period of 6 months. So within 6 months, this must be stated, and nobody does exactly know what the results will be, and if the results will be negative regarding EasyJet, regarding whatever company, the operating permit will immediately be revoked in between, within the period of 6 months, and the company has 2 weeks to repatriate the passengers from any distant shore. So this is one thing, a threat, if you like, a chance to prolong a little bit, but at the same time a threat. Second is the connections between United Kingdom and the continent will be extended for another 12 months, but only the connection between these two blocks and not the connections within the European Union. So this is what is meant by the term basic connectivity. The connections between the continent and UK will be upheld for another 12 months. If this legislative package enters into force, not yet the case, and the entering into force is, by the way, also dependent on the approval of the British legislator, and the clock is ticking, and I'm really looking forward whether or not we can achieve this.
if there were to be a no-deal Brexit, which Elmar was outlining there, with everything ending on the 29th of March, then what's going to happen is that prices are going to rise. That will be prices of food, that will be prices of, in terms of travel and tourism, but equally what we have is this uncertainty that surrounds the whole of the Brexit negotiations. So again, Elmar mentioned uncertainty if there were to be a deal, or if there's to be a no deal, and who knows, there may even be no Brexit. So it really does feel that we're sort of on a cliff edge. I believe I'm the only Brit on the panel, but I have honorary Brits here. And, we're seeing this play out somewhat with disbelief that we're only 23 days away from the Brexit deadline, and still there's this amount of uncertainty. So uncertainty is bad for business, it's bad for consumers. What we're seeing in the UK is that consumer confidence is sort of trending down, business confidence is trending down, and ultimately that's having an impact on our GDP. In the case of a no-deal Brexit, we expect GDP to sort of be lower in terms of performance by at least 3% over the next 5 years. So that is a substantial amount, because we're already sort of stagnating in terms of the UK economy. So there really is a sense that it's going to be bad for consumers and bad for business because of this uncertainty. However, we know that there are also sort of the upsides. So the fact if we leave the European Union without a deal, that will have a negative impact on the pound sterling. Already we're kind of trailing the levels that we had before the referendum result, but it has recovered. But if we enter a no-deal scenario where we leave we crash out, we revert back to World Trade Organization rules and regulations, that's going to have a massive shock. And the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney has talked about these adverse shocks to the economy. And that obviously will have a knock-on impact on the pound. And at Euromonitor, our forecast model suggests that potentially we could lose another 10% in pound sterling. So again, it means that for UK outbound, we're looking at $5 billion less in terms of outbound expenditure over the next 5 years. But if you flip it round, it also means for the rest of the world, particularly Europe and North America, our great source markets, that the UK as a destination is going to be relatively affordable. So there's pros and cons.
What does it mean for airlines? Are they prepared for this change?
Yeah, thank you. And for me, running a pan-European airline, which is the 10th largest airline in Europe, it has really significant impacts.
When we look at consumers, what they really value and prioritize is convenience, simplicity, and they want things to be seamless and frictionless. And so what Brexit does is really put a spanner in the works. It really, if you look at travel brands, destinations, all around the world, it's all about making sure that they're being as consumer-centric and providing an experience that one is local, authentic, but equally seamless. So it does seem like, and there's a lot of technology being sort of used to achieve that, such as biometrics and artificial intelligence, machine learning, personalization. And so it just seems that Brexit is so counterintuitive to what consumers really want, even though the British population voted for it. So it's very hard to square a circle.
If we look at air travel, connectivity in Europe has never been bigger than today. I think it's the best connectivity, especially if we are here at ITB. all the primarily southern European countries, I think all the flights by the low-cost carriers or by leisure carriers like us, I think the connectivity to those regions without the European Union wouldn't be anywhere near where it is today. So, and I think everything what puts that at danger puts our industry in the long run at danger. And there are other things. If we think we all live in different countries, we don't have to pay more roaming fees anymore. I think there are so many benefits in the European Union, which everyone expects now to be standard and to be given, but they don't really realize that the European Union brought them. I think they're just complaining, should be bananas be curved or straight or whatever, because I think there are some stupid things which the European Union, like every one of us, has done for sure, and there is maybe a little bit too much of bureaucracy, but I think it will put our industry under tremendous risk if we really go back to where we have been before. And on the other hand, I think if you talk about consumer confidence, and especially the consumer confidence of the British consumers, I'm personally surprised how strong the consumer confidence in the UK has been in the recent years, because due to the weakening of the pound, I think holidays for British consumers have been 10-15% more expensive. I sense a tremendous willingness from the officials and the civil servants to strike a deal. Honestly, even if you go to Westminster, if you talk with the civil servants, they know they want a deal, and I think the same is true for Brussels. But on the other hand, I think there's still the big question, it's primarily the North Ireland backstop, so I think it's where the European Union clearly says we can't compromise the 4 freedoms. This is the basic principle of the European Union, and it's a big success factor of the European Union, and they will not compromise on that one. And actually, I think the UK is actually asking exactly that. So I think this is somehow nearly a deadlock situation. Shall I read it? How does a worldwide company prepare for the Brexit, as nobody knows how it's actually going to turn out? The question from Paul Schaeffer. Paul, that's a very good question. We have to prepare for all outcomes. And honestly, we are and have prepared for all outcomes. And starting with the worst case, which is a no-deal scenario, as a manager of a business, you have always to prepare for the worst, which we can't speculate. Will EU citizens need a tourist visa in order to travel to Great Britain in the future?
Well, what we're looking at after 2 years of transition, if we do strike a deal, and we have 2 years of transition that finishes on the 1st of 2021. After that period, the EU and the UK have agreed that there will be a system a bit like ESTA, so that you pay €7, so that you have 3 years access to the European Union and you know, the flows between the EU and the UK. So we're sort of becoming a bit more like that third country in the way that we can access the US. So so there will be a fee, but equally it's just how much sort of checking there needs to be done when you're traveling. There are reports of potentially queues that are hours long, particularly at airports that are highly dependent on UK visitors such as Alicante, Amsterdam, Berlin. So it's also the hassle factor. It's not just how much you're going to be charged, but it's also how much is it going to cost you in terms of time.
Do you expect a big shift in the vacation destination of the Brits following Brexit? Especially, will they be more inclined to spend their holidays within UK, which definitely affects your business?
My personal view, I don't think so. Having lived many years in the UK, Cornwall is beautiful, but you can't guarantee the weather. You know how the weather is on the Mediterranean. So trust me, they will continue to travel.
We're definitely seeing a shift towards sort of non-EU countries. So, for example, countries such as Turkey, Egypt, Tunisia. But these are also countries and destinations that have been impacted recently by terrorism and are now on the up. And so you can equally see countries such as Portugal targeting UK consumers, saying there'll be specific UK lanes to avoid any queues and, you know, that hassle factor. Greece is being very highly competitive with its pricing. And equally Turkey, very proactive with a new marketing campaign in the UK. So I feel that Europe maybe needs to be a bit more proactive because these other destinations are back and they're definitely targeting price-sensitive UK residents.
Okay.